Now we turn to the first speaker for the opposition, Ruby McIntee, a second-year history and politics student from the University of Edinburgh. The floor is yours.
Before I begin, I'd like to quickly thank the Edinburgh University Debates Union. Without them, I couldn't have got this far in terms of debating and speaking. If you want to go to some of their events as well, I know they're hosting some public events. They also have every Monday, they've got a workshop if you want to improve your speaking and debating ability. Do you like to gamble? No, actually react. Do you like to gamble? Come on, raise your hands. Who here enjoys a gamble? Who here enjoys gambling with your future? Who here enjoys a gamble where the stakes are not only your lives, but the lives of others? The problem with side proposition is that they offer you a gamble with bad odds. It's not even a gamble that you go in and you know that there's some certainty in what the outcome will be. It's that there's a whole plethora of networks that they need to form that are not formed. It's because there's a million deals that need to be made that have not been made. It's because they tell you we might be able to join the EU, but they're not able to tell you that we will be able to join the EU. There's a whole bunch of issues with their argumentation that basically allow someone to stand up and say that this is a gamble, that there is enough uncertainty that particularly at this moment, you should not take this path. First, I'm going to engage a bit of refutation before I go on to my main argument, which is a pragmatic case for a united kingdom. Refutation, then. 4 main points. First, on the EU, and in terms of us being able to rejoin it if we are talking about an independent Scotland. I think the argumentation they gave you here was a bit tired, insofar as there's many reasons why we're not able to do that. Look at Catalonia and other secession movements elsewhere in Europe. There's a whole bunch of vested actors with vested interests within the European Union that don't want to vote and don't want to allow someone to follow and join the EU post-independence because it directly conflicts with their own interests. Also, note the geopolitical instability, which means that people already don't want to engage in this. They don't want to have to restructure big things. But let's say that even if they could do this...
Can I make a point of objection, please?
Sorry, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to get through a bit more of my speech first. Even if they could do this, it probably means that there's going to be a sufficient enough period of instability that even if we are able to join the EU, which again is a maybe, it's probably not worth it. Second then, on illegitimacy, because we get from the speaker, there's a treaty of the Union, and this is some illegitimate thing. I think that almost every state is illegitimate if we go by this principle. That is to say, the Haitians took their country by revolt. Were they illegitimate? Many of these deals that countries have go back thousands of years, hundreds of years, and lots of them are seen as illegitimate now. But just because they were made illegitimate doesn't mean that we shouldn't go by them, we shouldn't stick by them, because they probably offer us lots of rewards. And as such, we want to keep engaging in that. Finally then, they tell you about how we have a lack of say and how we're not able to pop... Sure.
I'm most grateful to you for taking a point of information, a question really. Are you willing to gamble with the possibility that the next Prime Minister of the UK is a person by the name of Nigel Farage?
I'd like to thank that speaker for the point. I think there's a couple of things to say here, which is that first, I think there can be active campaigning against Farage. I think that's stronger when we do it together rather than separated. But secondly, and I'm going to talk about this later in my speech, there is a real question about Scotland's future should become independent. That is to say, currently, the main thing holding together the SNP is the fact that they're the politics party for independence. Their main goal and the main cohesive factor, i.e. the glue of their party, is the fact that they're all striving for independence. But despite that, you'll have some very different views within the party. I'm sure the speakers later will be able to attest to this. Stephen Flynn is not your Kate Forbes. There's a million different perspectives. Once you achieve independence, what's uncertain is the future past then. I think there's a possibility for something worse than Farage. Okay, on the lack of say. Technically, the UK lacked a say in the EU, in an analogous way that Scotland lacks a say in the United Kingdom. That is to say, there's a second treaties and they're able to make certain things that then Scotland or the UK, in either analogy, would have to follow. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that we were part of the EU. In fact, I think it was a pretty good thing. Insofar as lots of the benefits that we got from there were probably pretty good. I think most speakers would agree on both sides of the house here. Insofar as this is true, it's also true for the United Kingdom. Why is this the case? Similarly to the EU, they can have veto certain powers, but also we get lots of things from them. For example, the Barnett formula, we receive lots of money, which allows us to do things like run our hospitals, run our public services. They might say that it's Schrodinger's sort of Scotland, but I also think it's Schrodinger's say on who has the authority and legitimacy. Just because something has the ability to say no to something doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing that you're part of it. Second thing then, about foreign policy and Scotland's say in the world, because I think this again is also contestable. What necessarily grants you the ability to make lots of these foreign policy decisions? A, probably your financial backing, and B, probably your ability to sort of pool together funding. Often you'll need lots of people to do this. Think, for example, are the Greens powerful, or are they powerful when they're in coalition with the SNP? You gain political power and things like this once you have amassed enough space. For example, if Scotland was to be independent, we might be able to make these decisions, but they'd be significantly less impactful. Currently then, we're able to have a say in Westminster, and once that say is had, we're able to have a greater impact once those decisions are made. I think this is a pretty valuable thing for Scotland and its say in the world. This is particularly true when Scotland does have a say. We have a devolved parliament, they have lots of powers as well, so they're able to make certain decisions that are pretty important. For example, on healthcare, there's lots of devolved issues, well, they'll make specific changes here. Okay then, moving on to my main case. A pragmatic case for the United Kingdom. Detangling Scotland from the rest of the United Kingdom would trigger a prolonged period of instability, politically, economically, strategically. The transition would not be a clean break, but a complex unraveling of a deeply embedded system. There's going to be two main points in my speech. First of all, the economic impact, and second of all, the political ramifications of this. So what would have to change if Scotland was to become independent? First, the funding from the UK government. The Barnett formula gives us an annual lump sum of money, which is able to be allocated to certain things. This was 45.5 billion in the 24-25 fiscal year. It's also adjusted in real terms, i.e. for inflation. This is probably pretty good. It's set to rise in 2026. This is good insofar as it pays for lots of devolved public services, healthcare, education, transport. The formula means that on average, the spending per capita is 17% higher than it is in England. That is to say, there's 17% more spending on someone who's born in Scotland and who lives there than there is in England because of where they live and because of how taxation, things like this, is managed. But secondly, we also have an issue with trade agreements. Scotland trades with the UK a lot, okay? So, 4% of our, is 4% larger than this trade with the UK. Sorry, 4 times larger than it is with the UK. This means that creating a border with the UK would probably be pretty costly, insofar as you'd see all of the same economic ramifications that we did see after leaving the EU. Similarly, we'd see that going forward if we were to secede. But finally then, there's a slight issue on currency. And I'm going to be very charitable here and say that even in their best case scenario, i.e. Nicola Sturgeon's plan with a careful and responsible phased approach, is probably actually really expensive. It's because it's actually physically pretty difficult to invest in lots of these machines, because to print money, that has to be of a significant quality that you can't have things like counterfeits, which you can't have. So it means that probably you're going to have to spend lots on this. But also there's a question about what Scotland would do for a currency. Would we go floating? Would we go fixed? Would we be able to join the EU? Would we not be able to join the EU? There's a big issue here, and it's unresolved. Again, they're going to tell you a plan maybe will be put in action, but they can't tell you precisely what's going to happen. So what do these changes mean? It means that probably once we succeed, it hits the economy 2 to 3 times harder than Brexit, see LSE 2021. The income per capita in Scotland probably decreases between 6.3 to 8.7%. Think, the UK had 47 years of agreements with the EU that made trading really, really good for us. Scotland has 318 years of these trade agreements. We probably want to keep going and allow us to deepen this financial connection. Okay then, onto political stability. First, national security. I'm sure other speakers can tell you a lot more about national security than I can, but I'm going to do a quick overview for you. Scotland has no military independent of the UK. This is also true for lots of other key defence structures. GCHQ, MI5, established intelligence networks. You can't set these things up overnight, folks. They require effort, planning, time, patience. Obviously, these are established systems that you need a while to set up. I think it's going to be very difficult to establish these for 2 reasons. A, monetary costs, and B, difference in what should be done. That is to say, defence is a very politically hot and fraught topic, right? Everyone has their own opinions on it. It means that making decisions on this is often comes in clash with others. But second, the cost is just massive. Which means that even if we could join the EU afterwards, we'd have to have this time where our national security was on the line. This is important geopolitically. Estonia triggered Article 4 recently in NATO, there's instability and genocide in the Middle East, there's a rise of populism in the Americas and at home, and now more than ever, we need to put on a united front. The romantic appeal of independence must be weighed against the real material risks of statehood. This is not a question of identity, it's about the pragmatics. But if for a second I was to indulge in a romantic appeal of identity, Scotland has been a part of the United Kingdom since 1707. That's 318 years of developing a complex system of interdependence, a fabric of trade agreements, cultural ties, political arrangements. Unraveling this would be painful, an impractical process, the pulling of 1,000 strings where each one has someone's life in the balance. Beg you to oppose.
Thank you so much, Ruby. And I echo the sentiment to go to the Edinburgh Union debates.